He's one of the key people contributing to the development of Islamic finance in the country. I went to visit him in his office at the very top of Petronas Towers. Dr. Mahathir, what was it about Islamic finance that you saw that others didn't?
Religion is a very important factor, especially among Muslims. They want to adhere to the teachings of Islam. So one of the things that is forbidden, of course, is usury. They find themselves in a very difficult position. They have a lot of money. If you think that a country like Saudi Arabia produces 10 million barrels a day, the amount of money they get from the sale of this oil is huge. What do they do with the money? They have to find a way to keep it. And if they can do something without committing a breach of the injunctions of Islam, I think they would. So as the price of oil went up, we see Islamic finance also doing well.
What are the challenges, though? Some say it is an illiquid market. Others say there's a lack of consensus.
Well, we have seen what has happened to the conventional banking. It is so liquid that people play around with it and they abuse the system, resulting in the present financial crisis. Islamic finance somehow has not been dragged into this crisis.
Given the current crisis, should the Western world adopt Islamic finance to ensure that it doesn't happen again?
What we can see is that it's not as open to abuse as the conventional banking, and therefore no interest banking. You don't have to say it is Islamic banking, but no interest banking should be acceptable to a lot of people.
A lot has been done here since the early days of Islamic finance. Perhaps the most significant achievement is the creation of an Islamic trading platform introduced to handle Sharia transactions. It's called Suk Al Sila, and it's fully integrated with Bursa Malaysia, the Malaysian stock exchange. Initiated as a national project and strongly backed by senior government officials, Suk Al Sila is growing rapidly. Today, it offers the opportunity to trade commodity internationally. Datuk Tajuddin Atan is CEO of Bursa Malaysia. Datuk Tajuddin, how does Suk Al Sila work? What does it entail?
This is one of the interesting Islamic products that we have in Bursa Malaysia. What it entails is actually a real trading commodity platform that facilitates Islamic liquidity management.
Liquidity is always an issue in Islamic finance. What sort of volumes are you looking at, and what kind of growth are you anticipating?
I think current trading volume sits around 500 million to 800 million US dollars per day. The growth potential is huge. There is liquidity available in different jurisdictions, in different space, onshore and offshore.
How important is it for Islamic finance to be internationalized?
This is a cross-border issue that starts coming in. While we say that in Malaysia there is a lot of Islamic fund, but there are also Islamic funds out of the Middle East and especially in Europe and London. Why is internationalization important? Because once it starts achieving a certain level of need, critical mass is important, acceptance is important.
Suk Al Sila here at Bursa Malaysia is testimony to how far Islamic finance has come over the past 10 years. That trend is showing no signs of slowing. In fact, it's estimated the Sharia financial system will soon manage 4% of the global economy. Tangible evidence of such growth is the number of non-Muslims choosing Islamic finance in Malaysia. Badlisha Abdul Ghani is the CEO of CIMB Islamic, one of Malaysia's most prolific banking groups. CIMB operates across Southeast Asia, offering Sharia-compliant products to a growing number of non-Muslims.
Islamic finance in general provides great value proposition for anyone, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim. The value proposition that it offers is very competitive.
Do non-Muslims need more convincing to put their money in Islamic banking?
The answer is no. In fact, it is easier to sell to non-Muslim than to sell to Muslim. Non-Muslim typically looks at what is the value on offer. whether or not the bottom line is good for their pocket. In CIMB alone, non-Muslim accounts for about 40% of our customer base. And in some other banks in Malaysia, more. Some have even 70% of their customer base being non-Muslim.
So, Badlisha, is this a rising trend then?
Islamic finance, if you look at Malaysia, for example, is very much part of the contemporary financial market. It is in the mainstream. It is now roughly about 22% or 23% of the total banking sector. More than 60% of the capital market, particularly debt. And in terms of the equity capital market, it's about 80%. So at the end of the day, Islamic finance is a significant component of the financial market in Malaysia.
There is a perception out there that Islamic banking offers limited products. Isn't there truth in that?
Not in Malaysia. Right? In Malaysia, we have a very, very comprehensive offerings to the market. I would say, in essence, we have everything, practically everything that is on offer in the conventional finance space.
As demand for Islamic financial services grows, so does the availability of products. In Malaysia, takaful, or Islamic insurance, is worth 15% of the global insurance market, outpacing conventional insurance in terms of growth rate. The word takaful originates from the Arabic kafala, which literally means guaranteeing each other. It's an insurance concept practiced in various forms for more than 1400 years. In the early 2nd century of the Islamic era, as Muslim Arabs began expanding their trade to India and Southeast Asia, mutual funds were set up to compensate anyone in the group who suffered losses through mishap. This concept was adopted across Europe and used as a template for marine insurance. But how does this concept of cooperative insurance translate into the modern world? Hans de Coupier is CEO of Etika, Malaysia's leading takaful company. Hans, how does takaful work and how is it different from conventional insurance?
Takaful is based on the principles of Sharia. So in everything we do, we follow the Islamic principles of the Sharia, which relates to the investments, which also relates to the sharing of the performance of the investments. But even more important is the concept of brotherhood that you see everywhere in Islamic finance. That means that the contributions, because we don't call it a premium in takaful, we call it the contributions. The contributions are shared among the participants. It's not policyholders, it's participants. So that means the fund that is managing the risk is not owned by the company, it is owned by the participants. And there is the element of brotherhood, which also means that at the end of the day, the performance of that fund is not a return for the company or the shareholders, it is shared with the participants. From the view of the shareholders, that means that the shareholder is actually an operator. We are not seen as owning or transferring the risk. We are operating the fund on behalf of the participants.
So how regulated is the takaful industry?
Depends highly country to country. But Malaysia has been leading in regulating, actually developing, designing the takaful industry.
How receptive are non-Muslims to takaful?
There is two elements in takaful. On the one hand, there is the Sharia element, and that is an attraction for the Islamic population in Malaysia. But there are also many other elements, like the profit sharing and the ownership of the fund. And what we see also in our portfolio within Etika is that, for instance, the Chinese or other population groups are attracted to those values of takaful.
Islamic finance is now embedded in Malaysia's economic system. Take the global sukuk market. Islamic bonds worldwide are worth $180 billion. In 2011, 73% of those sukuks were issued here in Kuala Lumpur. Shell and Toyota are among foreign companies which have successfully raised money this way. It's a very profitable business, now attracting a variety of international investors. eager to replicate the success of Islamic bonds in different markets. China, home to 20 million Muslim investors, is clearly on the horizon. In 2011, Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, Khazanah Nasional, issued the very first sukuk denominated in Chinese yuan. Izani Ghani is one of the key people behind the operation. Everybody talks about the potential of the Chinese market. What does it mean to you?
Oh, vast potential, vast potential. I think in terms of requirements for it, yes, it is very vast. Investor base, it can be very big as well. The only challenge that we may have is on the education to the investors. Some of the investors in Hong Kong, for example, when we had our first roadshow for UN Sukuk, they haven't even heard of the word Sukuk, which is Islamic bonds.
So why Sukuk and not bonds?
Our approach here in Khazanah is somewhat different. To us in Khazanah, Sukuk financing is our mainstream. Bond financing our alternative. Only if we can't do Sukuk, then we go to bond financing. And as you know, it's quite a reverse to many other corporations. We took this decision many years back, I think as late as 2005. We know that the Malaysian government has been trying to push KL as a hub for Islamic finance. So it's only fair for us as an investment arm of the government to be supporting the initiative.
We know there is a lack of consensus in the Islamic banking world. Does that pose a problem for companies like Khazanah?
It's almost impossible to find a standard in a way. So I think as long as we can harmonize the issues.
The convergence of Sharia standards is one of the major issues facing Islamic finance today. The industry operates on a regional basis. There is no central regulator. A product or a practice considered Sharia compliant in Southeast Asia might not be regarded as such in the Gulf, with daunting consequences for investors. Jasim Ahmad is the Secretary General of the Malaysian-based Islamic Financial Services Board. The institution has a task to promote and enhance the stability of the industry by promoting standards which aim to become global.
Consensus is important, but I don't think we should overplay the idea of consensus in the sense that certainly from the Islamic perspective, diversity in viewpoint is a overriding principle. There are, in terms of Sharia compliant views, there are specific legal schools which have their own legitimate approaches. So in that sense, consensus is important, but it's not the. It's not. We don't need 100% consensus on all issues. I would also say that there is considerable consensus in most areas of the Sharia, and that helps enormously in allowing cross-border financing to take place.
There is a perception out there that some countries are more liberal in their interpretation of Islamic finance compared to others. Do you agree?
I think the approach to Sharia does depend very much on national histories and national culture. And this does differ. This is different across countries. In some countries, they find it easier to take a top-down approach, for example. But in many other countries, there is a much greater reliance on a decentralized structure.
Shouldn't Sharia be Sharia everywhere in the world?
Sharia is immutable. It's the immutable word of God, and it's unchangeable. But the understanding of the Sharia by human beings is something that is governed by specific approaches of interpretation, and that can change to some extent, and it has changed in some respects, or is changing, to accommodate new situations as we find them in the world of Islamic finance. So I think from that sense, the response in Islamic finance to the need for change has been quite remarkable in the last 20, 30 years.
As the industry moves forward, Malaysia is placed at the epicenter of change. Over the next decade, the challenges include the quest for greater regulation, product innovation, and an increasingly international market. Many argue this is the moment of truth for the industry. an opportunity to make Islamic finance truly global, an opportunity which must not be missed. Will the industry be able to come together? Our journey continues.